Welcome to Mindset Learn Extra Live. I'm Katleho, this is Kathy.
And I'm sitting because she's so short, so at least I can almost
now we're the
eyeball
same
her.
height, eh? Yeah. That's what we've resorted to.
Yeah.
What are we doing today, Kathy? Some nervous system
Yeah,
stuff.
we're doing nervous system stuff. We're doing animal responses to the environment. What they actually should have said is human response to the environment. Us people, how our brains work or don't work.
But we are animals, so might
I
as well. It doesn't
suppose,
matter,
hey.
hey?
But I'm amazed that people have no issue with being called an animal, but
Yeah.
they have a huge issue about being called a monkey.
Yeah, because people don't like being monkeys. Because monkeys are weird.
Or being
and
related
funny.
to monkeys.
Or being related to monkeys.
I don't know.
It's
Hey,
not a-
I
it's
think
not a nice
chimpanzees,
thought.
chimpanzees have a wonderful time. Wouldn't you like to go sit in a?
And then scratch our fleas off ourselves.
But that's being they're networking
Yeah.
when they're scratching fleas, and just think how nice they are to each
Yeah,
other
they
people
are, and they
because
clean each other and they
clean
there
each other,
for
they
each other.
care about each other.
Just like you guys should be on the
Ah.
page today.
Now, nervous system people, please, it's important. And you've got to understand the nervous system before we go on to the endocrine system, which is chemical coordination. At the end of the day, everything is controlled by the hypothalamus. And a while ago, Kat, I said to the guys, in fact, yeah, it was round about Valentine, said to the girls, if a guy tells you he loves you with all his heart, ignore him, find
No.
somebody else. But if a guy says to you, I love you with my entire hypothalamus,
Then that means that is
it.
his all.
It's his everything. Because
goodness.
not one cell in his body functions
Without that.
without the hypothalamus doing it or causing
That's
it.
fantastic. Now I'm going to say
Yeah.
that to everyone when I get home today.
I love you with my hypothalamus.
My hypothalamus.
Yeah, you see, here at Learn Extra, we start new things.
Yeah,
now,
definitely.
You see, I'll move away, and I'll still be little, so she doesn't feel
So that
too
we-
bad. Okay.
Take it away, Kathy.
Yeah, we'll have
Let
to
me
get
take-
you.
get
We'll
my
have to
chair
get
back.
you those high shoes, honey.
Yeah, hey? Little high
Okay.
heels.
People, animal responses to the environment. Here we go. First of all, the nervous system, and the nervous system controls the functionings of everything in our body. How? We've got, now please just use your common sense. You know, 90% of life science is just pure common sense. Just think a little bit, okay? It's actually easier than asking directions, guys. So here we go. Central nervous system is the brain and the spinal cord. So I'm going to use yellow, and we're going to do the central nervous system, which is here. Central nervous system, okay? It's the brain and the spinal cord. I mean, whoa. Then we have the peripheral nervous system, and we'll use our orange. And the peripheral nervous system is your sensory, motor, and mixed nerves. So these are all the nerves that come in and from your eyes, what you see, what you hear, what you taste, everything that is around you gets picked up, your senses, gets picked up by the peripheral nervous system, and that feeds into where? The central nervous system. Because what controls everything in your body is the brain. Alrighty, now, the autonomic nervous system. The autonomic nervous system is very, very special. So we'll use, I don't have many. We can use green. Okay. The autonomic nervous system, look at it. Autonomic means it has the word auto in front of it. And what do we mean with any word that has auto in front of it? It means it works on its own. It works automatically without anyone putting anything in. It does its own thing. You know the fact that you can sit here now and watch this, but you carry on breathing, okay? Your blood keeps pumping around your body. Your lymphatic system keeps oozing and pushing the lymph fluid up. You've got a whole bunch of processes that are going on. Do you know that you see your nose all the time? And now all of you are thinking, and you're all like staring at your nose like squint people, all right? You see it all the time. But the thalamus says, you know what, it's there. You are born with it, hun. So ignore it and look at everything else around you. Doesn't mean you don't see it. It's just your brain has decided it's not important anymore. Okay, so you've got all these things happening in your body. You are hearing things. Hopefully you're focusing on my voice or Kat's voice, and you're looking at this, so you focused sights here, hearings here. But I can promise you now that if you stop for 1 second, and I'm going to stop for about 20 seconds, and give you a chance to listen to, switch the sound down, and listen to everything that's going on around you. Come on. Okay, what did you hear? I'm sure you heard a dog barking. I'm sure you heard your mother yelling at your little sister or your little brother because they haven't done something. I'm sure you can hear somebody out in the street talking to someone else. I'm sure you can hear a radio or a TV on somewhere else in the house. Birds, cars, maybe an ambulance. You can hear all of this, but what do? We switch off. And when you are really focused and concentrating, it's not switched off. You are switched on to what you are focusing on, okay? And switched off to the rest. How? You can still hear it, but you're not taking any notice of it. All right, so all of that is your peripheral nervous system or your sensors, but your autonomic nervous system is what keeps your heart beating, your liver working and deaminating and doing all the things that the liver does and detoxing and blah, blah, blah. Your kidneys keep filtering and working and taking all the toxins out of your blood. Everything keeps working because of the autonomic nervous system. So the autonomic nervous system works with your organs and systems. And it makes sure that everyone's doing what they are supposed to do at the right time and the right amount. Okay, that's your autonomic nervous system. But how does the autonomic nervous system know what it has to do? Well, it picks it up via the peripheral nervous system. For example, you have here in your carotid arteries. So if you take your 2 fingers, okay, two, and you put them in next to your trachea, which is this lumpy pipe over here, next to it, you will pick up your heartbeat. You should pick it up on both sides. All right? The reason I wanted you to do that was because I wanted to show you where it is, okay? That's your carotid arteries. And your carotid arteries take blood from your heart to your brain. Big, very important. Your brain cannot go or should not go without oxygen at any time. Right, so while the blood is now flowing to the brain and the heart is pumping and everything's absolutely awesomely great, in the carotid arteries and also in the aortic arch, so the arch that the aorta makes as it comes out the heart, we have special receptors. And those receptors are called chemoreceptors. And we also have thermoreceptors. And when your blood temperature goes up, it's picked up there. And what happens is it stimulates and it converts the stimulus to an impulse. Impulse is sent via the central nervous system, okay, to the region in the brain that monitors the autonomic nervous system, which is the hypothalamus. All right. And your heart rate, your breathing rate, everything that you do, your temperature, your pH of your blood, everything is then coordinated, and organs are told to work faster, work slower, cool down, warm up, etc., etc. And it's all because of your autonomic nervous system, and it works. It's not, or let me put it this way, it's not controlled by your will. So it's not controlled by your will. It's not controlled consciously. Okay? Whereas your central nervous system also isn't really, but that's where all the information goes. Your peripheral nervous system is everything you see, hear, touch, taste, smell, and all the various things that happen inside your body, temperature, pH, etc., happening inside your body. All of that information is channeled via the peripheral nervous system to the central, which is your brain, and the most important. Okay, now, the nervous system, how does the nervous system work? And I want you to think about this. If I take, and how on earth did I do that? This thing has it in for me. I promise you now. Okay. how does it work? If I take my finger and I scratch the tip of my finger here, I can feel it. All right, the fact that I'm doing it, I mean, I could get cut here and she could say cha 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 cha, but I'm doing it. All right, so this finger's moving and this finger can feel it. What's happening? I have receptors because they receive. I have receptors here. I have receptors in my eyes, and we'll go through all the receptors, but there's a receptor. The receptor takes the stimulus, which is the flicking, and it converts that stimulus into the language of the brain, and that's called an impulse. So let's start. And if you understand this, I promise you now, you will not have a problem. So here we go. You have a stimulus. Whatever that stimulus is, seeing, hearing, tasting, touching, smelling, hot, cold, blah, blah, any stimulus. That stimulus is picked up by a receptor. Now, think of a receptor. It comes from the word to receive. So if I take a ball and I throw it to you and you catch it, you receive. The receptors receive the stimulus, and it's picked up by the receptor, and the receptor is like a translator. And it takes that stimulus and it translates it into the language of the brain, which is an impulse. So it converts stimulus to impulse. And I'm going to put in brackets here, the impulse is the language of the brain. Okay, you've got to think of it like that. An impulse is the language of the brain. Now, we've got to get it to the central nervous system, because remember, your receptors are part of your peripheral nervous system. So, it converts the stimulus to an impulse. Now it's got to use a mechanism to get this impulse to the spinal cord and to the brain. So how does it do it? Well, it says, okay, because it's come from the senses, which is the receptors are in the senses, we're going to now go along sensory neurons. Now, neurons are just nerve cells. A whole bunch of neurons together makes a nerve. All right, so stimulus picked up by the receptor, which is in the senses, okay, converted to an impulse, which is the language of the brain, and it travels via sensory neurons. So think of the highway between two major cities. We're now traveling to the major city. So we're on the highway to the major city. So your sensory neurons, and where do they go? They transport to the central nervous system. CNS, central nervous system. So they transport to the central nervous system, to the spinal cord and up to the brain. Okay. Now, the impulse goes all the way and eventually it gets to the brain. When it gets to the brain is like, well, what do you do with your brain? You think. Okay, and the brain is then going to interpret the impulse message. Okay, it interprets it. It says, okay, well, hang on. Kathy's hair is irritating her face, so what did she do? How do I respond? Because this hair is now sitting here tickling my face. While I'm talking to you, I can feel it here on my skin, so what is my reaction? My brain says, hold on, this hair is irritating. Lift hand, use ring finger, and clip behind the ear. Is the hair there anymore? No, it isn't. If it was, I would repeat the action. So my body is responding. Okay, why? Because my brain. So my brain is going to interpret the impulse it's just received. It's going to decide what to do on action, okay, that needs to take place. And then it's going to send that information via impulse, because remember, that's the language of the brain and the spinal cord. I'm going to have you reciting this with me, okay? The info via the impulse, and it's going to send it on the other side of the highway, which moves away from the main city. And that other side of the highway is run by the motor neurons. So it now travels, this information that the brain now wants to get me to do in response to the information that the receptors received. It now says, okay, impulse, go via the motor neurons, and guess where you've got to go? You've got to go to the effector. Oh, that looks like an E. Effector. Now, what do you think an effector is? It's whatever is effected and the action is done to. All right, so I'm now going to have the effector. Let's think. If I see a really sad movie, or I see a horse being killed in a movie, my eyes see it, my brain says, oh no. My brain responds by making my eyes tear and I start crying. Okay. If I feel an insect or something on my hand, I feel it. That impulse is that stimulus is converted to an impulse by the receptors, and that impulse then travels along sensory neurons to the spinal cord and to the brain. The brain says, uh-oh, could be a problem. Have a look at what's going on, so my head will move. Okay? But before I even do that, my hand is already moving there to, if it's early evening, my brain knows it could probably be a mosquito. But it could also be a spider. It could also be an ant. So I look, and then my hand is going to react. So my head is turning, and my hand is reacting, and my brain is telling the muscles to move. How? Via the motor neurons, spinal cord, peripheral nervous system, to the muscles here. I mean, not peripheral, to the muscles. And it'll cause these muscles to contract and move. So a whole bunch of muscles are going to be contracting and relaxing to cause the movement of scratching, smacking, rubbing, whatever the case is. But that is how it works. So the effector are the muscles or the glands that respond. Okay, it's the muscles or the glands that respond. Sweat glands, very hot, and it gets hotter and hotter. What do? My body picks that up. Hypothalamus says, wait, so message to the brain, impulses, get to the brain says, not a good thing, so what are we going to do? We're now going to cause the sweat glands to produce more sweat, and you feel the sweat oozing out of your pores. It's all a gland or a muscle. Walking past a shop, you're hungry, you smell. Come on, Ty and I last week wanted shawarmas because of Schwann cells, which we're going to do now, okay, which we did with the grade 10s, with the grade 11s. And Schwann, you think, oh, food, and your mouth immediately, your salivary glands start to release saliva. That is a effector responding to the brain. Okay, so there you go.
Ooh, now I'm hungry. Now I want shawarmas.
No, it's almost supper time.
Yeah, it is. Guys, I hope you're enjoying it. Get some refreshments, jog a bit, get energized, and we'll see you after the break. Welcome back, Mindsetters, to Life Science with Kathy, and we're live. You know this. Hope you guys have your pens inked and you're revitalized and you're ready to roll with us, because Kathy has some more interesting, funny-looking slides to show us all about the animals and how they respond to the environment. Very exciting. Kathy, please take it away.
Okay, this board and I are going to have a huge fight soon. Okay, it's just point blank, and everything I've just written is gone. So,
okay.
Listen, okay? Because I've got a slide on here.
There it is.
Oh, here it is. Oh, cool. Okay, stimulus, whatever the stimulus. See a shawarma dripping with juices, okay, with everything on it that you could possibly think of, all right? Or a pizza. Just think of a nice cheesy pizza. Now you can see it, you can smell it. How do you respond? You think, oh.
You get hungry like immediately, hey?
Exactly. And what are you doing? Your mouth just starts watering all over the show. Responses. So, stimulus. It's picked up by the receptors. In this case, it'll be the nose, the olfactory cells, okay, sense organs. The eyes, all right? You have receptors in your eyes, photoreceptors. Photo means light. And also, remember, anything you smell, you can also taste to a degree, or taste, you can smell to a degree. Try tasting something when you block your nose. It doesn't work. All right? Converts the stimulus to the impulse. That's what the receptors do. The impulse then travels via sensory neurons, because it's coming from sensors, okay, to, and this is very important, people, it is to the central nervous system. Sensory neurons only ever carry to the central nervous system. It's the one side of the highway, okay? Gets to the brain, and the brain says, tell me, it's like the wise one. It's like the old wise one. It says, what's going on here? All right? And it then interprets, and it decides, and it converts the message that it's sending into an impulse, because impulse is the language of the brain. It then decides on this action, and via an impulse goes via the motor neuron, because that's the other side of the highway, moving away from the brain and the spinal cord. So motor neurons move away, whereas sensory neurons move to. So away from the brain and the spinal cord to the effector. And the effector is whatever's going to be affected by the message from the brain. So your salivary glands sending out tons of saliva into your mouth, getting it ready to eat a slice, a bite of that juicy, scrumptious pizza. Okay, your nose, you sniff some more. Like that. Never. Okay. You do all these things. Why? Because you're hungry. Walking along and you see a beautiful flower, or you see an animal that's hurt and you want to pick it up. Every response that you have, on every action that you have, is as a response to what your brain is processing. Okay, so that's our process there. What I've got here, and they'll put this onto Facebook for you, stimulus. I just needed for you to understand what is what. Stimulus to a receptor via the sensory neuron to the central nervous system, the spinal cord and the brain. And then the brain interprets, decides, do I react, don't I react, blah, 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 and it moves via the motor neuron to the effector, and you end up with a response. Girls, a guy tells you he likes your perfume, okay? That's his response to having smelt it. All right? So his brain then responds. And what do? You look at him, you hear, your eyes, your ears, all those messages are sent to your brain, and then you think, is this a pickup line, or am I interested? And
Does
then
he
you
like
can
me?
just, hey?
Does he like me?
Yes, and you just get this little smile on your face. And even the smallest smile will elicit another stimulus to him, and receptor, blah, 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 and he'll then come out with, and he'll smile back. So everything we do is the stimulus converted to an impulse to the central nervous system, and then the response that we have. Remember, the highway to the spine and the brain is always via the sensory neurons, and when messages are carried from the brain and the spinal cord to an effector, okay? What is going to be affected? To a gland, muscle? It always travels via the motor neurons. Okay, now we are cooking. Blah, 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 blah. Neurons, impulses enter the dendrite, and I'm going to explain all of this to you. You've got basically 3 parts to a neuron. You've got the cell body. I mean, whoa. You've got the dendrites, which are the things that stick out. And you've got the axon, which is the tube which connects the cell body and the dendrites. I mean, how difficult is that? So, cell body, axon, dendrites. End of story. Not sure where that one came from. Okay, now, sensory neurons. Sensory neurons, okay, remember, will always carry messages to the central nervous system. And the central nervous system, I think I've said this 1,000 times, is made up of the brain and the spinal cord. Okay, so that's what the sensory neurons does. We have two types. Okay, we have unipolar and we have bipolar. And no, not nutty people, bipolar. How do you tell the difference? Unipolar looks like this. In fact, there's a diagram here somewhere, but I'm going to just quickly do this. And unipolar has the cell body there. Okay? There's only one connection to the axon. All right? And the impulse is always going to travel in this direction. It goes to the central nervous system. All right? From the receptor. Okay, so it travels in that direction. And it's only got one point where the axon is in contact with the cell body. Bipolar, bi means two. Cool. You're actually starting to use your brains now. Bi means two. So here you're going to have blah, 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 and it does this. And there's your cell body. So you see, it's got two little connectors. And that's why they are bipolar. Your unipolar carries from all your senses and all your sense organs. All right, remember your skin is your largest organ in the body because it is your largest sense organ in the body too. And it will always travel dendrites all the way to the central nervous system. So always towards the central nervous system. Okay, your bipolars in the brain. Then we get the motor neurons. Motor neurons look like someone who's having a really bad hair day. Okay, we're going to do all of this in detail anyway. Remember, they travel from the brain, so it'll go in that direction because they're heading towards the effector. So from the central nervous system to the effector, they move away from the central nervous system. I said to you, they look like they've had a bad hair day. So they've got like, how's that for a bad hair day? That is your multipolar neuron. And these are your dendrites. And it travels from the dendrites along the axon to the terminal end plate. But we'll do this in detail. So always from the central nervous system, dendrite side, to the effector, which is where the terminal end plate sits. These little branches go into the muscle, and they'll, for example, cause the muscle to contract, or the gland to contract and squish whatever it is that it's squishing out. Sweat, tears, saliva, blah, blah, blah. All right, so, and then you get your connector neurons. And your connector neurons are in the spinal cord, and also in the brain. Think about this. If I'm traveling... Okay, I'm going to use Johannesburg and Pretoria. Tshwane, Pretoria. Tshwane, Pretoria.
Tshwane, Pretoria.
It's the place where the union buildings are.
Pretoria.
Okay? Or let's make it easier.
Yeah.
Durban and Pietermaritzburg,
Yeah.
then there's no argument. Okay. If we're traveling between Durban and Pietermaritzburg, you are one highway taking you from Pietermaritzburg to Durban, and you're another one taking you from Durban to Pietermaritzburg. All's well, except how do you get from one side of the highway to the other side? Because maybe you're on your way to a meeting and you've left your briefcase at home. Does this mean you have to travel all the way to Durban and then try and find a way back all the way to Pietermaritzburg to pick up your briefcase? It would be crazy. So what do we have? We've got off-ramps. And your brain and your spinal cord have off-ramps too. Also, when you take a shortcut like that, that's where your connector neurons are. But also when you get to Durban, and you now want to come home back to Pietermaritzburg, you have to find a road that links this side of the highway to that side of the highway. So sensory neurons, motor neurons. And that connecting road between the two highways is your connector neuron. And your connector neurons look like mini motor neurons. They have the same labels as your motor neurons. They just look like bad hair days. All right. So your connector neurons you're going to find in your spinal cord. And where else are you going to find them? In the brain. All right. So connector neurons are going to connect your sensory neurons to your motor neurons, like an off-ramp or an on-ramp. And your brain, once it gets there, it's like going from Pietermaritzburg to Durban. How do you get back home again? You don't fly. You've got to use the roads. You've got to use your motor neurons. So you need a connector neuron to connect it all the way back. Come on, people, you can't tell me this is hard. It's so easy. Okay, now, with all of this, we've got the synapse. And I just want to see something here because we have a problem. I'm missing a slide. Okay. It's just done that. So we have a problem here. So let's just go. Okay. Here we have a synapse. Now, what I want you to think about is two islands. We have an island here, and we have an island here. And at the risk of anyone taking offense and saying I'm being sexist, I'm not. I'm actually being a mother and a teacher and someone who understands boys and girls. Here we go. On this island, we only have girls, and on that one, we have boys. So the girls want to get across to the boys, except these are shark-infested waters. Bit of a problem. Or the boys are on this side and they want to get to the girls. Whatever the case is. But they can't just swim across because there are sharks there. So they get little, well, we'll put the boys on this side, very innovative, and they build a little boat building house. And in that little boat building house, they get machines and they get shapes and they all work hard at building little boats. Okay? And they build all these little boats, which are quite sweet. But to do that, they need a lot of energy. So how do they work the energy? Well, they've got this powerhouse. Or powerhouses, lots of them. And in there, you've got other guys that are busy making fruit juice and fruit cocktails and food and burgers and chips and pizzas. And I'm really hungry. But they're sitting there making all of that to provide power and energy for the guys in the boathouse to make the boats. And you're saying, Kathy, have you lost your mind? I mean, this is life sciences, please. It's this boring vesicles and blah, 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 blah. You're talking about party time. I'm saying, yeah, party time. So what do these guys do? They get in their boat, and they go across their little shark-infested waters, and they get to the other side. Except no one told them that the girls on the other side, whoa, they're very different. And there's one that has an amazingly large sledgehammer. And she, as soon as that boat lands here and the guy goes walkies all the way along, she takes her sledgehammer, boom, 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 and she smashes his boat. So there is no hope for him. He can only go in one direction, and that's further on in the island. He cannot go back home again because she has smashed his boat. Now for the explanation. Are you all listening? Let's do this in green. And now, if you understand my little story here, I promise you, you will never ever mess up a synapse. Okay. This gap between the two islands is called your synaptic gap. Okay. And the process that's going to take place here is called the synapse. Two neurons can never ever touch. If they do, these boys are going to hop from one island and backwards and forwards and backwards and forwards. In our language, and in our case, that would cause the muscles to vibrate. And it would be a problem. we want the impulse to only ever travel in one direction. The impulse is our little chap. Okay, that's the impulse. He comes along, he gets in his boat, he sails across the shark-infested waters, which is the synaptic gap, and he gets to the other side. So, impulse, the powerhouses are the mitochondria. And you'll remember that mitochondria, their biggest job is to produce lots and lots of ATP, which is energy. We need energy for this impulse to hop across the synaptic gap. But we also need a boat, and the boat is a neurotransmitter. So I'm going to do this. The little boats are called neurotransmitters. And the neurotransmitters will, like acetylcholine is one of our neurotransmitters, the neurotransmitter carries that impulse across the synaptic gap to the other side. When it gets here, there is an enzyme that will destroy the neurotransmitter. So the impulse cannot get back. The impulse has to carry on its road. Okay, and this is just, yeah. Oh, and, oh man, come. The house here, I can't make this stop. This little house here is called a vesicle. And those vesicles will release the neurotransmitter. All right, so that is how an impulse will travel across the synaptic gap. It's your chemical neurotransmitter. Oh, here I've said your acetylcholine, dopamine, serotonin makes you feel so good and relaxed. That's it. That's how it works. You've got to destroy the boat on this side. You've got to destroy the neurotransmitter. And that's what happens in people who have Alzheimer's, and I'm running out of time. But people who have Alzheimer's shake. And the reason they shake is because this enzyme isn't being produced anymore, or it gets produced less and less and less and less. And what happens is your impulse can now go backwards and forwards between the two neurons. And that's what causes the muscles to contract, that they cannot control it. All right, over to you, Kat.
I can't help wondering why those girls on that island are just so mean to the poor boys.
They're so desperate.
They are, hey?
Yes.
Oh, well. Guys, enjoy your break. Have a good time. Get some water, some food. We'll see you after the break. Welcome back, Matric Mindsetters. Kathy is so loving your comments on what a wonderful teacher she is and how you wish she was your teacher. I also wish you were my teacher. And
sweet.
yeah, guys, I know you're enjoying it, so let's keep going, Kathy.
Guys, thank you very much for those comments. It really touches me, honestly. You're very special. And I will try my best. And I'm getting all blur. But thank you. Oh.
And she's blushing.
Oh, man. Anyway, okay. So here's a picture to show you. I'm going to ask John and Indy and them to put this up for you. But you'd have your axon. You can see your impulse traveling along the axon. It's an electrical impulse. Remember, you need energy for that. And here the dendrites. So it will pass, and then it will go onto whatever the organ or the gland is. You never, ever have anything touching between the two structures. There's always this synapse, even with the receptors. So you've got this process of always the gap. And it's your enzymes and your neurotransmitters that make sure that that impulse goes in the direction it has to go. All right. Now, what does a synapse do? It ensures that the impulse only ever travels in one direction, and that is incredibly important. If not, we end up with all kinds of problems. Okay? Once the neurotransmitter has crossed the gap on the post-synaptic side, which means the other side. Presynaptic is this side, post is on the other side. It will destroy it. Now remember, your neurotoxins like strychnine, that you often find in rat poison and ant poison, or they used to put it in rat poison. I think it's illegal to put it in rat poison and ant poison now. It actually messes up and blocks their synapses so that they then move backwards and forwards, and that's what causes the person to die. Uncontrollable muscle spasms, and remember, the heart is a muscle too. So when the heart stops beating properly and the lungs stop functioning, the person dies. Okay, because what causes you to breathe air is your ribs going onto your lungs and then moving away from your lungs. So pressure to push out or breathe out, exhale, and the ribs will move away, causing space for the lungs to expand when you inhale. Now, when all those muscles start going sugar, you end up not being able to breathe and your heart doesn't work and you die. Strychnine is a horrible, horrible way of poisoning people. Okay, or killing people. Right, now if we look at the brain, okay, protection. Close your eyes and use your brains. Okay, use them. All right? Take your hands and feel. What's the first thing you can feel? You can feel hair and skin, right? Now, and a lot of fatty tissue. But what's underneath there? It is bone. So, bone is our first port of call. First thing we have are the bones. Okay? Then we have cerebrospinal fluid. That's cerebro, brain, spinal. So it's fluid that is around the brain and around the spinal cord. And that acts as a shock absorber or a cushion. Okay? It also regulates the blood temperature. Then around the brain, we have structures called meninges. And if you look at the word meninges, all right, it's, well, M-E, meninges is Latin for membrane. So meninges, you've heard of illnesses like meningitis. It means that the meninges become infected. And because they sit right around the brain, they almost cover the brain like cling film. You know, Jiffy Wrap. Exactly like that. It's like vacuum packed around. So every little fold, it is right in contact with the brain. And when the meninges get infected, the brain tissue gets infected very quickly. Okay, so here we go. We start off with the outer layer, is the dura mater. So think of the dura mater as being durable. And if it's on the outside, it has to be durable. Okay, think of good paint. It's got to be durable. Outer layer. Then, forget about the middle layer for now. Think of the inner layer. This is the one that's right against the brain. And my mother always used to tell me, don't have a pea brain, use it. Now, a pea brain as being a little, you know what a pea looks like? The beans, peas, pea brain. Don't have a pea brain. Use that grey matter. Think. So for me, it's easy to remember, pia mater. It's the membrane that covers my pea brain. You see? Shaman, she was very sweet, though. It wasn't like she was insulting me. So just use your brain, which is good advice for any girl. So pia mater, P-I-A mater. Mater means membrane. So dura mater on the outside, pia mater on the inside around the pea brain, when you don't use it and think, okay? And the middle one sounds like a phobia of some sorts, like being scared of spiders. And I don't know where this word came from, but I mean, here they come with arachnoid. It sounds like someone who's paranoid about spiders. I mean, I don't know about you, but arachnida, acrophobia, blah, blah, blah. But you've got arachnoid. So the arachnoid, dura mater on the outside, pia mater covering the pia brain, all right? And in between, you've got this membrane, always work in threes, you see, the arachnoid. And the arachnoid, between the arachnoid and the pia mater, between there, we have our cerebrospinal fluid. And that cerebrospinal fluid cushions the brain. So, for example, if somebody, you know when they do fighting, boxing, and somebody gets punched here, what happens? The head flies back, but the brain sits there. Now the bone is moving back. So the brain still stays there until it gets shunted by the bone. All right. And the fluid, the cerebrospinal fluid that's supposed to protect it, now gets squished away. And the brain goes bonks against the front here, and bonks against the back. And that's why when fighters fight too much and they start losing their memory, because why? Memory sits here. This frontal lobe is where your memory, higher intelligence, reasoning, all of that is here. So, dura mater outside, durable. Pia mater inside covers the pea brain when you don't use it. Okay, and the arachnoid between the between the dura mater and the pia mater, and between these two here, you have your cerebrospinal fluid, and that fluid is there to protect your brain. Okay, now we've got grey matter and white matter, and if you get a question on the brain, they're going to ask you grey matter, white matter. What's the difference? The grey matter is grey because it's made up of the cell bodies. Okay, now think about it. You've got those little cell bodies, or with a little nuclei, or bad hair day, your motor neurons. Okay, all these cell bodies. That's what makes up the grey matter. And that's part of the cortex of the cerebrum. Cortex is always the outside. Medulla is always the inside. Medulla, middle. Meta, middle. Okay? Your white matter is made up of your fibers. So, you know all these fibers here? So you can think of the axons. And all those axons taped together end up making nerve fibers. And that's what you see in the white matter. So that's all the, think of it as all the highways. It's the roads which join to make the spinal cord, etc., etc. You know when you eat a chop, and, okay, let me just take this down. When you eat a T-bone, it does this. Okay, look, I'm not too hot on that. You've got the fillet side here, and you've got the rump side here. That's what a T-bone looks like. And when you look in this little gap over here, there's some white stuff. And that white stuff is the marrow, which is actually is the spinal cord. And that's what you're eating there. So that's your fibers. It's all the little axons together. Your cell bodies, grey matter. The fibers are your white matter. And that's important for the brain, because in the brain, the grey matter is going to be on the outside, and it forms part of the cortex, which is the outer part. And the inner part is the white matter, so it's on the inside, and it forms part of the brain, or let's put an equal sign there, part of the brain medulla. All right? Now, the brain gets divided into two hemispheres. The brain is like a walnut, left and right, and the two hemispheres go together. And what happens is you have the corpus. Now, look at this word. Corpus callosum. And when I hold somebody close to me, okay, it's important. Okay, now I know, I mean, we're playing with words here, but just think corpus callosum. It's important, corpus, important, to keep the left and the right hemispheres next to each other. So the corpus callosum holds the left and the right hemispheres close. Okay? And what it does is it helps to relay information from the left to the right side of the brain and the right to the left-hand side of the brain. Okay, that and the medulla oblongata. So we end up, what I feel with my right hand is actually being perceived in my left side of my brain. And what I do with my left hand is actually being perceived in the right side of my brain. It's that crossover which takes place. Right? So that's the corpus callosum. Here's a pic of the brain. I actually like this. It's like one of those old-fashioned drawings. But here you've got the corpus callosum holding the left and the right hemispheres together. You've got the cerebral cord. Cerebral just means part of the cerebrum. So you've got the cerebrum, and then you've got the cerebellum. Now in Afrikaans, it's the klein brain. And cerebellum sounds like a baby version. So cerebrum and the cerebellum. Brain, little brain. Afrikaans, it's nice because Afrikaans is a very descriptive language. And here they just said klein brain. So you've got the brain and the klein brain. Quick, easy, end of story. Now, the thalamus, it's the thalamus. Remember, I said earlier that you can see your nose all the time, but you don't notice it. Why? Because the thalamus is like an editor. It says, you know what, that's not important, this is not important, that's not important. Put shoes on. You can feel the shoes, your feet in the shoes. And I mean, I can see Kat saying to me, shaking her head here. You put your shoes on, you can feel it. And the minute you start walking, you have forgotten that you can even feel those shoes. However, after a night of dancing or traipsing through a shopping center on a Saturday, shopping the whole day with your friends, I promise you now, you can feel every part of those shoes pressing on every single little baby toe, and every part of your feet and your toes and your everything hurts. Why? Because initially, your thalamus says, don't worry about it. It's there, but don't worry about it. It's not important. Let's focus on the important things. All right, so that's the thalamus. It's like an editor. The cerebellum, balance, equilibrium. Okay, all of that is, and muscle tone. If your muscles aren't toned, you can't have balance or equilibrium, and that's because of the cerebellum. That's what the cerebellum's job is. Then you've got the brain stem, which is as the spinal cord comes out. Now, hypothalamus. People, the hypothalamus is what does everything and controls all your autonomic nervous systems. It controls every single function of every single structure in your body. All right, except the skeletal muscles, really, but I suppose they respond when they have to. But it's not run by conscious will. Temperature, heartbeat rate, breathing rate, pH, everything in your body, the functioning of every organ, hypothalamus. That's why I said earlier we were joking, but it's dead serious. Your hypothalamus controls everything. It is the bridge between, it controls your pituitary gland, which we're going to do later on, which controls all your hormones. So the hypothalamus controls your chemical coordination, and your nervous coord. It's all controlled by the hypothalamus because it controls the pituitary gland and it controls the rest of your brain. And then the hippocampus. Now, the hippocampus I love because the hippocampus, or hippocampus, which most people don't have to study in school syllabi, is actually ridiculous because that is what gives you your memory, your short-term memory, your long-term memory, what gets converted from short to long. Stories like I told you about the synapse just now will help to convert something from a short-term memory into your long-term memory because you can relate to it, you laughed, you had good responses, there were a whole bunch of perceptions around it. So people, the hippocampus, short-term control, short-term memory, long-term memory, but what it also does is it helps you to understand your spatial environment. So guys, I don't know, you probably have a problem here because you don't know directions. Hey? Have you ever seen a guy who actually knows directions?
Yeah,
hey,
never, ever.
Yeah, they always know where they're going.
But they never know like how to tell you how to get there.
And have you also listened to guys and their cars, if they have sat-nav or, any of the other, they always male voices. They don't put them on female voices.
Yeah, they don't.
Yeah. Us girls, we know directions.
Yeah, we know directions. So
anyway, my people, that's it. Please send us questions. Yeah. Ask us. And prepare them for next Wednesday, because next Wednesday, same time, same place. Eh?
Yeah, same time, same place. Thank you guys for a fantastic
Isn't she
show.
cute?
Kathy's
Such a
amazing.
sweetie.
Oh, thank you, Kathy. Bye, guys.
Cheers.
See you next week.